Siguli swagwe ine Kahnekiyostha hagnolha ho onkili wanundu se dungliwate ne tigaw hoanasu ne Kahnekawanaza. Tonet na like in linguistic terminology, we would call those particles. This list here, ostuha wando, diga wana deni. Nookji, we're gonna do our best to kind of give an explanation of how we would explain the use of these particles. So you might have to bear with us because this is a little bit of a challenge without context. So we might need your help in creating some context for these phrases.
Also, I just wanted to explain too that there's three major parts like in our language, and so we have our verbs, which are usually actions or states or whatever, or characteristics. So that's the verb, and so there's the three main parts. So that's the verb. Then we have nouns. Those are things, people.
Place.
People, place, things, and then particles. So there's only three really major word types in our language, and they all have their own way of working. So the verb has its own way. It's the more complex type words. Nouns, like I said, are things or places. Those can also have their own complexity sort of as well, but they're not as complex as verbs. And then we have particles. So that's the last one. And particles are a part of that really holds our sentences together. We don't really have sentences, I guess. But
It's like the particle usage is kind of like the main form of expression in Oneida. Well, not really the main form, but it gives a lot of ability to express like an opinion or a thought or a feeling. It just kind of adds to that and adds emphasis to the verbs and the nouns.
Yeah, so adds emphasis or effects to the words. And so these words that we're going to work with are these particles that we're going to work with. Some of them are standalone, like they're by themselves. And then you have other words like you have ne tone or nakawadu, and they're sort of said all together, and they're always kind of said that way. And so what we call those are compound particles. So it means that they kind of have to go together. They stay together a lot. They're not always exactly in that exact format, but it's commonly said that way, like ne tone and nakawadu are kind of like, I don't know. Yeah, so they consider them compound because they're made up of multiple particles, but they just they have to stay together, sort of.
And so when you look at the particle list there and you look at the compound particles where there's like 2 or 3 particles put together to make a particle phrase, it actually changes the meaning altogether. And so if you were to use those by themselves, they mean something. And then when you add them or attach them to another particle to help create your phrase, it changes the meaning again.
I think another thing too is like as learners, when we're learning how to use these particles, it'd be a good idea to write down the context that they're in so that we know how to use them properly. Because sometimes, some of these particles, the meaning changes. There's not always we call it like it's not always written in stone what the meaning is, and it depends on the situation that you put that particle in. Sometimes, most of the time.
So kind of an example of what he's talking about is like, say if you're talking of the tense kind of matters too, like if it's past, present, or future tense, like a situation or incident that happened, say like between 2 people, or if you're describing something, or if you're just giving your own opinion on a matter, like all of those kind of things determine the interpretation of these particles. So the words and the context and that it's being used in is really important because these are really fluid.
The first particle that's written on there is wahi, and nehwa. So those ones, when we looked at them, they're pretty interesting because they're kind of like a statement, but you're also asking. It's almost like the person can confirm with you what you said. So like if I said it's cloudy out, I could say yo jigle wa, and it's almost kind of like it's just saying like it's cloudy out, eh, or something. I guess. And so if the person's listening and they hear it, then they can say hawa or nehwa or hazewa. There's a couple different ways that can come out.
So the way, like the easiest way I can like explain the use of wa or nehwa, like it to myself, that makes sense, is like, you know how we all say in it, like it's pretty cold out in it or whatever. Like you want someone to agree with you, right? That's what that particle is used. That's the way that it's used in a language. And generally, it's the last word in a sentence, so that I would be silent. And so, nehwa is, to me, it's the same word. It's just the I is underlined.
When we were trying to figure out what exactly it was, it's not really it's a question kind of, but it's more of a statement that kind of is asking, almost not really asking, but it's almost like you want someone to sort of affirm with you or confirm with you what you said. So I guess it's, yeah. And Ron had a good example earlier, and he said, like, was talking about when you come in from, if it's cold out, you say yo tole wa, yo tole, or you could probably say yo tole giwa. And then so there's that gi can also be put in there too, giwa. And then we also have our, when we say bye, we say nagiwa. And that's the same word, nagiwa. So the next one is Nook. That one too, it has to be in a context for it to sort of make sense. So the one that most of the learners know is nokchi, and that means like but.
Guahnok is like kind of like just that.
Yeah.
Guahnok is another one. It's kind of hard with the Nook because usually, like in my experience, anyways, in hearing speakers, it's usually attached to another. It's usually seen as a compound particle, so it doesn't really stand alone. I mean, it might. It's just I'm not really familiar with that myself in hearing it stand alone. So it's usually the way I've heard it is nokchi, which means but, or guahnok, which means kind of like it's just that.
If you're saying guahnokchi, I think it was like guahnokchi kadewi and deht. I'm just practicing. I think that was one thing that we said before, guahnokchi kadewi and deht. And like, so in that context, it's not saying but. So that's where you have to have it in a context.
So guahnok kandeoya dehta boxing.
Yeah.
Like
Guahnok.
Yeah.
I'm only practicing boxing.
Yeah. I'm just practicing it. Like now, I guess. And there was another thing too. I think James said before, and I can't remember exactly. It almost came out like regularly. So like another meaning that could come out is like if I'm practicing something, guahnokchi kadewi and dehte boxing. It's like I regularly practice boxing is like sort of how that guahnokchi comes out. So if you just say kadewi and dehte or kadewi and dehta boxing, it's just saying like I practice boxing. So when you add that on, guahnokchi kadewi and dehta boxing, it's like I regularly. That's kind of what James explained to us before. If you're using it in a different context, like nokchi by itself, you could say, I don't know, like wagadat or no, waganu waktanihe nokshi segun wagatsanun. Yeah, wagatsanun. And so there's a few different contexts for that type of word. So as learners, what we want to be doing is to put it in a context with the speaker. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, yeah. So there's another one, yeah. So then you have, that's another real common one. What Don just asked was nakawadu. So, nakawadu, gadewi nandane. Something like that. Like I have to get ready. Have to get prepared. Yeah, nakawadu.
So like nakawadu ang sadal holiday kalau jihniole hashaga. You got to get yourself ready
Yeah.
before you go outside. Nakawadu, like it has to be done.
Yeah. So that's where Nook by itself is changing even. You say that. Nakawadu is another example. There's probably a lot more. I know there is probably a few more examples, but I guess for now that's all I can think of really. But yeah, so that nakawadu, there's like so many ways to use that, and it just really is saying like it has to be, and then whatever. So like I have to cook, nakawadu ongekun, and so on. I have to do this, I have to do that.
So like for that nakawadu, I generally use that when I'm talking to my daughter, and so if there's things that have to get done, like wagununte jiisle asanundol yat nukji nakawadu, like we have to desadohdal, like jojolan, you have to get dressed first, or you have to clean up first, and it's like I have to explain things, to her. Generally, I use that to say like these are the things that have to get done. So that's how I use that term, anyways.
Desadohdal.
Desadohdal.
Desadohdal. So the next one is nen and ne. So nen is like specifying a certain person or I think even subject. Yeah, so it mainly works with nouns, that word, nen. Can't think of any context for that one. Nen.
Nin lao ha, nin aksa,
Yeah.
nin, and then the name, their actual name.
It's basically just emphasizing what the subject is in your statement. Kind of like what the most important piece of information is.
Also like ladawyata, then you can specify who it is,
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nen Tom or Nen Tom, whoever. So nen is like a specifier, basically. And ne is like a real similar thing. Myself, I haven't really had too many times where like I heard ne. I know in Mohawk it's a lot more common. But I guess it would be just a matter of asking the speaker to use that ne. But I can't think of anything at the moment how other than like another way to emphasize someone or something.
Let's do this because it's really hard for the speakers to all hear us, and it's hard for us to hear the speakers across the whole room. So what if we work in our own tables? And just we'll go over that first list there. So wahi, nehwa, nook, nen, and that ne. And we'll just have a discussion at our own tables. I think that's probably the best. So we can explain what we understand the best way that we know how, but the speakers are the ones that know how to use the words. So then we'll discuss what we can, and then we'll break into the tables where you guys speakers can discuss amongst yourselves with your learners about the way how you would explain that. Yeah, how you use it.
Yeah.
Then we can hear it. How